Okay, so now we're live. Hello, everybody. We've got a little bit of a surprise visitor with us today. So Richard Patrick Jacobs II, who you may know from some of the forums on Facebook. And we're going to talk today about the fascination of Rolex. And then we'll kind of wing it for around about half an hour, something like that. So first of all, Richard, just tell us a little bit about yourself, because hopefully we might do this again in the future. So it might be interesting for people to have, some information on yourself. Actually, if you hit the mute button there, because I can't hear you at the moment. Okay, I'm wondering if if you're there, Richard, you've hit the mute button and you need to turn that mute button back off. Hang on. Bear with us. Okay,
Tony,
can you hear me, Richard?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and we're still live. Okay.
Okay.
I didn't change anything.
Sorry about that. For some
That's
reason,
okay.
my Bluetooth
I think
kicked out.
maybe you hit the mute button. Okay, we got no one watching at the moment anyway, so that's fine. Okay, so as we were saying, just tell us your thoughts on the on the fascination of Rolex. Tell us a little bit about yourself first, just so people who don't know you, just have a background information on you.
Well, in a nutshell, I started as a hobbyist. I purchased my first, ironically, it was a Rolex. It was a Submariner 5513. It was a circa 1981. I bought that for my 24th birthday in 1984. And the gentleman that I bought it from was a basically Swiss German. And I would come to find out he was one of the 5 highest ranking master masons from JLC. And that only came a couple years after meeting him. Very humble man. And we befriended each other. I used to go to his place just to hear stories. And gradually, one time, he was in the back working on a watch. A couple came in, they were looking for a watch. And instead of going and getting him, I don't know, I just, I stepped behind the counter. I started showing him these watches and stuff. And then when he came out, he sort of laughed, but he said, "Would you like to help me?" And I had 2 businesses of my own going, but I did. And then fast forward, I ended up getting my master horology certification. And then through the years, I went over to Switzerland and I received a couple of postmaster certifications as well, in complications and in chronographs.
Gotcha.
So in a nutshell, that's where, and we had the store, I as a partner from 1988 to 2006
Right.
when he passed. And then I just, I guess you could say, I sort of had a meltdown because he was the main reason I was in it. And when he passed, he was responsible for the majority of my watches in my first collection,
Right.
it was a substantial collection because obviously as a buyer, I went around the country 2, 3 times a year and I had the opportunity first dibs on a lot of incredible pieces.
Right. Gotcha.
But anyway, that's from that end.
I'm sorry that your friend, that happened. That's a difficult one to, to deal with, for sure, especially when you're, close to someone like that. And it was them that helped, bring you through and everything. I can imagine that would have knocked your confidence and enjoyment and passion back a little bit. But it's certainly good that that you were able to, carry on, and that we can listen to you now. And and more importantly, we have Bugsy. Good evening, Bugsy. And it's great that we can see your comments and posts and things like that on Facebook, forums and groups, and and things like that. It's really enjoyable, reading what you reading your your written essays and things like that. They're brilliant, and the best thing on all the groups is reading what you have to say, because it's not just the passion that you have, but it's the knowledge that you have, as well, which knocks everyone else of us, sideways pretty much. So I'm really happy, and it's wonderful that you agreed to come on here and have a chat with me. So that's brilliant. So what we were going to do is we're just going to have a little talk about sort of Rolex, why you think that Rolex is quite so mad and popular, and the absolute fascination of it. And then we'll just keep an eye on the questions and comments over there, just see what happens as well for the next like 20 minutes or so, and then we'll let you give you a little bit of peace and get going. But tell me a little bit about your fascination of Rolex, or the fascination of Rolex generally with people.
Sure. Well, first, hey Bugs, how's it going, bro? I hope you had a great
Very nice. Thank
vacation.
you.
I hope you had a real nice vacation.
I did, thank you.
Oh, that was to Bugsy. If Bugs is still
right,
out
okay,
there.
Bugsy, yeah.
And you too. You
Thanks.
too. But he sent some great pics. He posted some great pics on Facebook and whatnot. But I think with Rolex, they've always been, even going back to when I got into the hobby or the genre, they were number one.
Right.
And they were not, by far. You can name, like, you have at least a dozen houses that, if you want to talk about, like Les Grand Masons, you have your 6 houses that Rolex is not at their level. However, as far as, the average man goes, whether that man, is an auto mechanic, an electrician, a CEO, Rolex is Rolex. And they basically, I think for a lot of people, especially those that cannot, and I think Rolex really isn't that expensive. If you look at what you get, say $10,000, $10,500
Yeah.
for a stainless steel, most employed men can save, whether they have to save for 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years, they can save and get one.
Yeah.
But it comes with having access. And that is something that Hans understood. And Hans always talked about to his ADs was being very particular as far as, and it was not a luxury piece. They were not initially sold as they were a tool watch.
Right.
Okay. But I know, because I say this because my AD's grandfather, Hans, personally gave him their first distributorship, and they have it to this day.
Right.
Although now they're down to the grandson, who is a little younger than me, and he runs, he has the dealership now. But when he first came to town, he told them that, this watch isn't for everyone. This is for the serious man. And I think it's sort of taken on an arrogance all of its own through the years and through the decades. And now you have people that, do not have access. And I hear all these horror stories from, on the internet from these dealerships. And I don't know what's true and what's not true. I can only go on. And my experience is not a fair one to take into account because I've known my dealer since I was, going back 40 years, since my early 20s. So that's not typical. But I do know, and I trained the other dealership, I trained their general manager. Although she is not a master Mason, she has more knowledge than 98% of the masters out there as far as pure historical knowledge. And she, in fact, she sold two. She sold a Submariner date and she sold a Pepsi to two first-time buyers.
Right.
One came into her store. This was the second time, and she
So when
sold
would
in the
this have
GM.
been? How long ago would this have been?
I'm sorry?
How long ago would this have been?
This was in last week.
Last week, so yeah.
Yeah, last week.
Last
And
week.
the only reason the guy who got the Pepsi from her had to come back was because she did not have the Pepsi when he first stopped in, and she indeed called him. So, not everyone has to spend 50 grand or go in on their knees and kiss their ass. Excuse me if I'm not supposed to say that.
That's okay.
Not everyone has to do that, is what I'm saying. And so, you have that aspect of it. And then you have the aspect of a lot of these guys on the internet, and especially YouTube. They have virtually no knowledge. Most of them didn't even own a mechanical watch. Forget about a Rolex. They didn't even own a mechanical watch 10 years ago. Okay, they weren't even around for the first correction this century in 2008, when I had probably 60% of my former customers called me wanting to sell me their Rolexes because they needed money. Okay, most of these guys there now weren't even around then. And yet they come up with a lot of myths and outright fabrications. And then everyone has an inside Rolex insider. And the only thing I'll say to that is, if someone ever tells you that, I would immediately discredit them, because I know going back 4 decades, and we were as close as you could get without being an AD. We had, and especially my partner and my mentor, he personally, he knew Hans for 20 years. Now, I never got to meet Hans. Hans passed long before I came into the picture, but he never had inside knowledge. Their ADs do not get inside knowledge.
Right.
So when someone goes around and says that, and I'm not going to mention names, but there's a guy from the UK that, and he has a problem. He's always getting robbed.
Right.
But, they talk about insiders, and they have all these people on that supposedly worked at ADs. And I don't know if they're telling the truth or not, but that's just not what I've seen on this side of the pond. And I know Rolex goes to, if Rolex thinks there's a leak, they will go to what I consider some extremes to find out where it came from. Right. And if they can track it back to their employee, they're gone. So I don't see people risking their jobs and their livelihoods, to get on social media.
Right. Yeah, I got you. Yeah. So when did Rolex take off? Was it, because obviously it's been very popular, the whole time. But do you think that social media and the pandemic has lifted it up, a lot more? Because that's what it seems like, to me. Like I said, as we've chatted before, and you described me perfectly. I'm in it for the SHITs and the giggles, and that really is a perfect description for me. My knowledge is just bits that I pick up. It's very little. I just do it for the, literally for the fun of it. And I never once pretend that I know very much at all, because I don't. And I think that sometimes, when you listen to other people, they come across as being an expert, and you kind of think, well, how much, do you actually know? And how much have you just read on Wikipedia or something like that? And I actually, and I'm not going to name names either, But I was chatting with someone else who has a YouTube channel on G-Shocks. And the impression that I got is that some people maybe just take information from, Wikipedia and just literally just, read it out or something like that. And I think someone may have got into into trouble for doing that. But when do you think that Rolex really really took off? Because when I started getting them, which is like 4 years ago, they had, obviously my Yachtmaster was literally in the window, and now there's nothing in the window at all. So do you think it was the pandemic, or do you think it was more social media, or a combination of both?
I
Or
think
nothing to do with that, or nothing to do with that at all, and it something
no,
else?
no. I think now you have to understand, when I said, okay, in 2006, I liquidated, I sold my inventory, which we were the largest pre-owned and vintage in Pittsburgh and southwestern Pennsylvania. I sold my inventory to a Rolex dealer, and his wife started what they called an estate watch shop.
Hmm.
Okay, separate from obviously the Rolex AD, which was not allowed. And I exited the industry, and I got rid of all but a handful of watches, and I auctioned off about 80% of them through Christie's in New York, because we didn't go. This was I didn't trust the internet. I wasn't really on the internet, and in fact, with my businesses, my assistants did most of my computer work because
Right,
I was
yeah.
very ignorant. I would say, because I just got back into it maybe 3 to 4 years ago when I stumbled across a Facebook group.
Right.
And I would say someone like Bugsy, if he's still with us,
Yeah,
because
you
Bugsy's
probably,
been on a
probably
while.
is.
Yeah, he's been with a lot of the groups. He's been with Paul's group. He knows a lot more of that than I do, as far as how influential it was. I think it from what I saw, yes, I would say with the advent of social media, with YouTube and all this, and then you have all those different mediums, Facebook, Twitter. What's
Yeah.
the other one that I can't even remember the name, but the one a lot of guys post their
Instagram.
watch. I'm sorry.
Instagram.
Yes, Instagram. Thank you.
Yeah.
See, I can't even name them, but yeah, the Instagram, and that definitely. But here's the other thing, because I would say easily, I know on Facebook, and I'm a mod in a couple of fairly large groups, I'd say easily 40 to 50% of the watches that I see, including Rolex, are fakes.
Right. Okay.
Now, my mentor told me something that I've sort of remembered. He said that, while a single picture can eliminate a watch as being genuine,
Hmm.
no number of pictures, whether it's 330 or 300, can validate it as genuine.
Right.
And so, bearing that in mind, you can take with these super clones now, and I give lectures along with an FBI agent who's on a international multitask anti-fraud task force, and we have super clones that they've confiscated, and you cannot tell those, laying those side by side. They use the same steel as Rolex. They
Wow.
use their etchings. Okay, there is supposedly one factory, whose etchings, whose laser are identical, because a lot of them, the depth isn't there, the precision isn't there.
Right.
But I haven't seen the one that he spoke of, and that I've heard is out there. Okay, I haven't seen that, but that's how good things are getting. And so I would
If you
say
opened
that's
it up,
been,
would you better tell if you opened it up and you looked
oh,
inside
most
it?
definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. And we do that because when we give these lectures, we have, master masons at the lectures. We have
Yeah.
VIP clients, and then we have the ADs, and we open the watches up. We let them look at the movements,
Yeah.
because the only difference between a clone and a super clone is in the movement.
Right.
Cosmetically,
Okay.
they're identical watches, with the movement in a super clone being able to be interchanged with the Rolex. Now, I myself, but I'm going pre-pandemic. Okay, 2 years have gone by,
Yeah.
so a lot, has gone on. technologically, I'm sure within the fake industry, but there was not a movement out there that if you took the rotor off, if you started to go into it, you couldn't tell. Okay. Supposedly there is now. Okay. But again, I haven't seen that movement. But it makes sense that it would be a matter of time, before someone did something like that. But it just comes back to you buy the seller. You
Right.
buy the seller. You don't look at
Yeah.
the price.
Yeah.
And if you have to ask the question, and I say this in the Facebook groups when guys ask, they post a watch. If you got to ask the question, chances are it's fake.
Right. Got you.
It's like
Yeah.
you've answered your own question, bro. You don't have
Yeah.
to. You don't have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
post.
Yeah. If you're saying, can I trust this watch? Can you trust, if you can't trust the watch or the person,
Exactly.
then leave it well alone, because if you can trust the person, then you can trust the watch.
Exactly. So, but I would say that with the advent of social media, yes, that's when all watches, but especially Rolex really took off. And then everybody, they're sort of, especially with this young, I mean, I see, in their 20s,
Right.
and I see guys with 2, 3, 4, 5 watches that are, and I understand if they come from money, if their parents have money or what, and I mean, I was fairly successful in my 20s, and there's no way. I just, it's just, you see some things and it just 1 + 1, it's coming up 3, and it's like, it doesn't really work out. But I think that the pandemic helped. People, they went to the computer much more because they couldn't be out, they couldn't be about.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and those who loved watches got into it, and Rolex always being Rolex, people love them and they love to hate them. And I think those that don't have access, and or do not have the financial wherewithal to purchase them,
Yeah.
they're an easy target to hate on.
Got you.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. It does.
Form.
Yeah. And how did you, I'm just keeping an eye on time a little bit as well, but we're okay for a few minutes. How did you get into doing Facebook groups and things like that? How did you get in, how did you
Well,
get into
actually,
doing
I
that?
was going through, I'm on my 3rd bout of cancer. Going back
Right.
10 years
Sorry.
was my first. Well, no, actually, that's not true. It was 2008. So what? 14 years was my first. Then my second was 4 years ago, and then I'm presently dealing with the third. But so when I was going through the therapy, I'm sitting there in IVs, and I was playing on my phone, because for me, my phone is my computer.
Yeah.
I do have a laptop, I do have an iPad, and I do have a PC, but I use my phone 90+% of the time.
Right.
So, I ended up on Facebook, and then I saw some groups, I applied to get whatever, when you hit that button.
Yeah.
So I got into it. And then I have to say that the one individual who was very instrumental, and it was Mike Breakovich, otherwise known, I think, on YouTube as Bear Clooney.
Yeah.
He befriended me and, invited me in, sort of took me into a few groups and whatnot. And then I just met some guys, and, then there were some great guys like Bugsy and some other guys who you could tell were the real deal. They weren't in there trying to impress people. They weren't in there trying to, excuse me, but, trying to dick wag and, hey, look at me, look at my watch. They were in there for the love of the hobby and the love of the brand.
Yeah.
And so that's basically how now I even though I have an Instagram, I guess it's called a handle. I couldn't tell you what it is. I forget it. I've never used Instagram. I don't post my watches. I was just given advice from an IRS agent, ironically. Right. And about posting, especially one's luxury items on, on social media and on the internet. So I do post my watches when appropriate in the
Right. Yeah.
groups, but I don't start threads and post 5 pictures of whatever.
Right, yeah.
You know, that's just, plus that's not me. That's not my personality.
Yeah. I think, well, I've noticed from, I mean, I've been following you, on Facebook now for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, something like that. And I've noticed that you start some threads, but not so many. Mostly it's something that you kind of get into once someone's actually started something else, and then you pop in, you may show a photo or something like that. But it's your monologues and your things like that I enjoy reading. What you've written. It's very, very enjoyable, and it's fun. It's kind of like funny as well. Some of the things that you put in, it might be serious, but you do it in such a way that's respectful, but it's kind of like interesting, as well. So I think personally, I think the watch community is lucky to have someone like you in it, because there can't be many other people that are on Facebook or that type of thing that have your type of experience, going back. I mean, obviously some people now are in the business and things like that, but they don't really seem to be on social media. Most of the people that you get on there are, people like me and, YouTubers, and just people posting their watches and things like that. And there's certainly, have you come across anyone else on social media that has the training that you do of a master's and on all of this type of stuff?
Oh, heavens, yes.
No.
Especially in the Rolex forum. I mean, thank you for your words, but no, there are guys, absolutely, that blow me out of the water.
Right.
Now they may not be as opinionated. They may not have my personality. My personality, I mean, is a little different from your average master mason.
Right.
It's been that way since the first time I sat in class. Um, you know, I have a background that's probably very different from the average, quote unquote watch nerd. But be that as it may, there are a lot of guys that, they've forgotten more than I know.
Right. Got you. But
And
are they on social media though? Are they using Facebook and things like that?
oh, I can't. I know I see some good knowledge in the Rolex. In fact, I think you're a moderator over there. There are some guys there that have some legitimate knowledge, and they post legitimate posts.
Yeah.
And then we have some in the couple other groups. You got Tim Masso's group, then you got Mike's group. There are some guys there that have legitimate horological knowledge.
Yeah.
Where I'm amazed, and where I is, and what got me interested, really got me back into collecting, was G-Shocks. And
Right. Okay.
actually 75% of my daily wears now, because I'm going through radiation and I'm having IVs and whatnot. So I'm around metal poles, and the sides of some of the chairs are metal. So
Right.
I bang, and then when I get medicated, I get a little bit woozy. So I've banged really nice watches off of metal poles,
Right.
and
Yeah.
gotten some dings in them. So I wear my G-Shocks, and I probably wear G-Shocks 75% of the time casually. And then I'll wear one of my nice, though non-luxury. I mean, I consider, the Seiko Presage and that type of thing, or a Carl Bucher, stainless steel 3-hand date. I'll wear those during the day. I very rarely during the day, I'll have mostly have on G-Shocks. And
Gotcha. Yeah.
there are some young guys that just, there's a couple guys that I talked to that have taught me a tremendous, because no one knows more than these kids. I mean, they grew up with that.
Yeah.
I guess sort of like I grew up with Rolex, I guess, except I really only started in my early 20s. These kids started when they were what, 10, 12,
Right.
now
Okay.
they're 20, 22, and they've already got a decade of knowledge along with
Yeah.
having the watches. And it's just like, there's one guy that's 23 years old, and I love talking to him because, he's talked to guys over in Japan, G-Shock employees. So, he's a wealth of knowledge. But
Right.
anyway, that's that.
That's really, really interesting. No, I've enjoyed. Let's head off in a minute. Let's just read these. There's some comments down here. Can you see them on your phone there,
I
Richard?
cannot, and I'm afraid
Okay,
to
I'll
touch
just read them.
anything
So Bugsy, what one says one gentleman says he wants the GWG 2000. That's probably the G-Shock that I have, because you had that one, but you sold yours and kept your GWG 1000, if I remember rightly. Is that correct, Richard?
I actually gifted that 2000 to my brother, and I kept the 1000 only because they're basically the same watch, but I like the colors, and I just like the 1000. I like the colors and the way it looked to me.
Right,
but the 2000 is it's as good as it gets.
Yes,
That's the best Mudmaster out there.
It is a very, very nice watch. I think it's a shame that they just didn't put a couple more features on it. It would have been nice if they would have put a little bit more tech, inside it. But for whatever reason, they decided to keep it, basic how it was, apart from the, compass, barometer, and that type of stuff. Maybe they think, well, people don't use that generally anyway, so there's kind of like no point in, in putting that on if people probably not really going to bother using it. But yes, it's a very, very nice. It's a very nice watch. I've got my 50 fathoms on today, so I enjoy wearing. I love wearing the Rolex, but I must admit, I do enjoy wearing the Blanc Port. Yeah, it's a really,
I love
really
the 50.
nice.
It's
that. Really nice. Yeah, it's a beautiful watch.
Great collection.
So Bugsy says, I agree for the joy I agree for the joy gotten by people, especially as Richard says, the ordinary working guy from owning a Rolex and having people remark on it and appreciate it, then Rolex is certainly not that expensive. So he's like agreeing with what you were saying earlier on, that it's not that expensive, for what it is, if that makes any sense, as you said below. Bugsy also wrote, if you are a one and done watch owner, then Rolex gives you more for you than any other brand. Bugsy added, yep, Mike is a gem of a guy. Bugsy also has written, I love listening to Tim Mosso describing watches. He is absolutely knowledgeable, but more than that, he is a real wordsmith. So that's the comments and things like that.
Tim is a class act, and I've spoken to Tim quite a bit. His knowledge is legitimate. It's not internet gathered. He has a lot of books, a lot of horological. Like I have over 300 watch books, and he's got a substantial library. And he's spoken to some people, and that's where probably my most remembered and my best knowledge has come from speaking to other master masons, to other designers, to other people within the industry through the decades. We traveled quite a bit through the 90s before my partner started to, he started to age out, and then he got sick. He ended up, like I said, passing of cancer. But we were in Europe, we were in Switzerland. We got to meet some of the big dogs over there, and because that's the circle he ran in before he had to leave Germany. He fled in 1939. He was an Orthodox Jew, and it was always funny because he was 5'4", maybe $130, $135 Orthodox Jew, and I was 6'2", 230 half-ass Catholic, and so we looked like freaking frack. But we hit it off, and he took me under his wing. And
sounds like something out of Twins. I don't know if you ever saw the film with Arnie and Danny DeVito. Sounds like something like that. Sort of, very tall and very short.
Exactly. Exactly. But no, Bugsy hit it. Bugsy nailed it. If you needed one watch, and I call them lifers, Lifer. If you needed one lifer, and one that you could leave, if you wanted to bestow it on someone when your days were done, Rolex is that watch. And there are a lot of obviously Patek. I mean, you can go, but for day in and day out, and I opened 30, 40, and a couple of 50-year-old Rolexes that had never been opened, had never been worked on. And without, I mean, aside from being anywhere from, I think, just over 3 minutes to about 5 minutes off, they ran fine.
Wow.
Okay? That's good enough. And that's, I don't say that a lot. And it would be hard for someone to understand that if they hadn't, been there when I opened that watch. But that's pretty amazing. And so that's why when they talk about how great the technology is today, it's like, and I wear a lot of my vintage watches, which are birth years. So they're 62 years old and they've been serviced, but they run, a couple of them run inside of COSC specs in 4 positions, not in 5 or 6, but in 4 positions. And these are 62-year-old watches. So they knew how, watchmaking didn't just start, in 2010 or 2012 or with Pepsi, or the ceramic Daytona. And I'd still take the all metal Daytona over the ceramic. If you only get one, take the metal.
Okay.
And I own both, but I'm saying if I could only keep one,
you would keep the metal one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
all right. Let's wind up here. Let's wind up here, Richard. What I'll do is, I don't know if there's any other questions or anything else like that. We'll stay on here, Richard. So don't go away. I'll hit the end broadcast button so I can sort of talk to you again for a few seconds here, but nobody else will hear us. And hopefully we will, listen to you again here, in the future, so, thank you very much for, coming on here. I don't want to do too much with you because I know you're going through a lot at the moment. So better to keep them short and sweet. And then we'll kind of like get you on here, if you want to again, as and when we're able to. But, I just want to publicly, thank you for your time and your friendship and everything else like that I've experienced with you, over the last few weeks, or last few weeks, the last few years, you know what I mean? My brain, it doesn't work sometimes. Over the last few years, it's been very, very nice. And, and publicly, I hope that things improve for you. I've been there, not for me, but, my wife in the past, not with us now. So I kind of know what you're going through. So, I hope and pray that things, pick up for you, in the near future. And what I'll do is I'll thank you. Do you want to say anything before I was talking with Max last time and I kind of whacked it off and then he was just about to say thank you and goodbye to everybody and I turned it off before he'd said anything. Do you want to say anything to people before I end the broadcast, Richard?
Thanks so much for having me on and thanks for those that listened. I really, I appreciate it. And also take care, Bugs. And
I will do, definitely. And Bugsy.
I really enjoy, and the reason, because I've said no to a few YouTube individuals that wanted to have a discussion. And you're, in my mind, in the hobby for all the right reasons.
Thank you.
You're not in the hobby to dick wag. You're not in the hobby to show people, for the clicks and the subscribers and into this, into that. And we need more guys like you. However, unfortunately, it seems like we get more guys that are into the subscribers and into the, sort of the fall knowledge. And,
yeah, I know what you mean.
Hey, I enjoyed it. And it
was great fun. And thank you for your, thank you for your kind words. I'll end the broadcast, but you'll still be here, Richard. Thank you, everybody. Brother. See you again soon.
Take care, brother.